Sports Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Thanks for joining us for Newsmaker Saturday. It seemed to be for more than half a year the election audit that would never end. But finally there was a resolution about a month or so ago, and the findings were that Joe Biden won Maricopa County, the biggest county in Arizona, and actually did so by about 360 more votes than the original vote that we got shortly after election night. But what has happened in the weeks and months that are following is going to be debated for years. Senate President Karen Fann was spearheading this effort. She joins us on Newsmaker Saturday. Good to see you. I know you're retiring after some 30 years in public life. Did your retirement have to do anything with this audit?
No, absolutely not. I sold my business in March. My husband retires at the end of the year, and I still have 14 months to go, so don't think you're getting rid of me quite that early. We still have a tough year to happen. But January 2023, it's time for me to enjoy a little time with my husband.
And had nothing to do with the audit. You were just ready to call it a day. Okay, President Fann, let's just start at the beginning. When did it first dawn on you that you felt and others felt we needed to review this election result in Arizona?
Well, as you know, for many years, both sides, Democrats, Republicans alike, not only in Arizona but on a national level, have complained that they think there's problems with our elections. This is nothing new. I think it just came to a head this year, is like right after the election. Then we started hearing all of these stories about, you know, Sharpie Gate and things that didn't happen properly at the polls. There was a lot of questions. So I reached out to the Board of Supervisors and I said, we should get ahead of this. This is going to be like a year like no other. It's not going to just go away. Let's do a much bigger audit, sampling audit, so that we can put these concerns to rest. And if we find problems, let's fix it. And if we don't, we can assure the voters that we have a good, secure system.
And was the county on board with that originally?
Well, the first couple of weeks they were, and then there was a series of lawsuits that were being filed that got dismissed about 4 weeks later from outside forces. And then I reached back out to them and I said, let's do this. And that's the time that they actually said, nah, we're not going to do it. As a matter of fact, we don't think we have the legal authority to do it. And so I said, great, we'll do the subpoenas and give you that authority. We'll do it together. Don't move the ballots. Don't move the machines. Let's pick an auditor together. Let's do it at your facility and get this done. And instead of saying, okay, they sued us and said, you don't have the right to.
Do you know why they were resistant? Was it public pressure that was mounting from the left to not look into this? What was it?
Now, this is my own personal opinion here, because they were all gung-ho until they went into executive session and then came out. So my personal opinion is I'm wondering, did they believe that maybe the election wasn't perfect? And I'm not saying anything was necessarily done in an evil way, but did they know? Because remember, 2 years earlier, the 2018 elections, the Board of Supervisors came to me and acknowledged that the recorder had done such a horrible job they had to hire somebody to oversee him. So I think they knew that there was probably still some problems that were there.
And we know that no election is perfect, but whenever you have a Republican-controlled legislature looking into an election that was this contentious, you know immediately what's going to happen, or people are going to say, well, these Republicans are trying to overturn the election. Was that the goal here?
No, absolutely not. Never was the goal. And a lot of the times they said it was a partisan audit. That's not fair either, because from day one we asked the Democratic body to please be a part of this with us. We asked them to be volunteers. We asked them to do this, and the word went around through the Democratic Party and everybody involved and said, no, we don't want to be any part of this audit. So yeah, it became partisan only because the Democrats refused to participate.
Let me ask you about the selection of cyber ninjas. They have been derided, assailed as a company unfit to do this kind of work. When you first looked at who does this kind of work, how did that process play out? How did you arrive at that company, that particular company that you know has a shady, checkered past because of their involvement in some prior stuff with Trump that kind of tainted them right from the get-go?
So when you talk about being tainted from the get-go, I can tell you that a lot of this came from the left media. But let me answer your question to begin with. I started by calling the Federal Elections Commission and said, could you please give me a list of all of the certified forensic election auditors? We want to do this audit in Maricopa County, Arizona. And she immediately said, Karen, there are no certified forensic auditors. There aren't none. We
For
only
elections.
authorize...
For elections.
For elections, correct. And she says, we only authorize companies to certify the machines. Now, ironically, the two companies that Maricopa hired to, quote, do their audit, they were two companies that all they do is certify the machines. One of them was the company that certified the machines to begin with. So that's when I went back to the supervisor and said, you know, we're going to have to pick a different auditor because these guys are not certified auditors either, because there are none. They don't even do election audits. So consequently, I started reaching out. I started making phone calls. There were some audits that were being done in Fulton County and Atrium County and some of the other states. There were some companies I found out that worked with other states that did like a backup double check of ballots. And I just spent hundreds and hundreds of hours just trying to track down every lead I could to find out if we could do something. At the end of the day, I had 3 firms that submitted proposals, and what they did is 2 of the firms were putting together teams, and one of the other firm was somebody that works with Homeland Security that felt they could do it. Great company, and I'm sorry I can't even remember the name off the top of my head. Their quote was about $8.2 million, and at the time I thought, okay, there's no way we can afford that.
Well, so it became lowest bidder in the end?
No. Just because we were trying to figure out, at the time we had no idea what was going to be entailed. You know, we thought this could all be done in 60 days and you know, $1 million. Obviously, once we did, when the auditors got involved and they started the process and the lawsuits and everything else, it became much, much bigger. But I can tell you that one of the first companies that submitted was a company called Allied, and the media immediately trashed them, and I said, well, obviously we can't use them. Then this other company, Cyber Ninjas, submitted, came in and talked. They put a team together with Wake Technologies and Cypher with Ben Cotton, and well as some other firms, and so it combined the experience that they had had in different areas of election integrity. That's how they built the team up, and that's why we selected them.
Cyber Ninjas, as I alluded to, they were tainted because their leader, Doug Logan, had said some things about stolen elections and made some statements that, you know, really in the eyes of many people kind of tainted them from the get-go. When you heard that and you heard that stuff, did you immediately say, this is going to be impossible to get a result that people are going to trust?
No, partly because I did not know about any of that stuff. I knew that they were working with the audit in, was it Fulton or Atrium, one of those two, I forget which one. They had also done some background stuff.
In Michigan, right?
I think you're right. Yeah. Yes, I think you're right. It was Atrium. So I knew that they had some experience there, and as did Wake Technology and some of the other. However, I did not know about, were very upfront and said, you know, we have been doing this in Atrium County right now. The actual comments about anything that was said that they felt that there was some serious flaws in the election, that didn't come out until later, and the only way I found out is a media outlet went back and uncovered some deleted tweets, and that's how that started getting out and how I heard about it. But
so bottom
I had already hired them.
Bottom line, fast forward to the findings. If you had this to do over again, would you? And did anything come out of it that is usable?
Yes. So, John, I would absolutely do it all over again. In fact, we are going to be working on legislation that will actually start establishing more in-depth checks and audits of our elections. What we found out is that we know that at least a half a dozen election laws were broken. We know that duplicate ballots were not processed. The chain of custody, Ken Bennett is actually doing a series of these around the state, explaining things that he saw firsthand as to why some of our election laws were being broken. Now, I can't tell you whether those laws would have produced a different result, but what we do know is we also know that there were the envelopes, the ballot envelopes that you sign. There was a number of them that were not signed that were counted. We've been able to prove that. So at the very least, I think what we did here is at least put people on notice. Our elections are important. We do them, we follow the books, we follow the laws. And anytime that you try and break those laws or don't follow the book to the T, this is where people start having questions. This is where they start having questions about our elections and whether they're being done properly.
How much of this was driven by some polls that were done that showed 45% of the voters have questions and concerns about how this is all handled?
John, when we first started this, there weren't any polling done per se, but as we went through this, and I'm trying to think, it was probably like April or May when that first polling came out that you said the 45%. That was really telling, because if 45% of Arizona voters think that there are serious problems and questions with our election system, that's what we do. We are your elected officials. We are the Senate. It is our job to answer your questions. It is our job to make sure that your elections and your laws are being done properly. So, yeah, that's the least we can do for them.
Now, there's an effort to try to get private communications from cyber ninjas. They're refusing to turn over the private communications. Now you're in the middle of this. You're facing contempt charges for not handing over documents related to cyber ninjas. What's the resistance? I mean, if people want transparency, don't they want to know kind of the genesis of how all this happened?
Yeah, John, okay, so let's be very clear, because the liberal media is not being real clear about this either, is, first of all, the Senate has turned over 60,000 documents already. We only have a handful, proportionately a handful of documents that truly are that are privileged right now, because they are documents between us and our attorney, and some documents we are using to work on legislation. But we've turned over 60,000. Now, what American Oversight and the Arizona Republic is doing is they are demanding all of the private emails, texts, subcontracts, those things between cyber ninjas and their subcontractors and clients. Those are private companies. So they are claiming that they should be entitled to all of the communication between two private companies, or three or four. Now, first and foremost, I don't have that stuff. I cannot turn over something I don't have. I've never had it. And so how can they hold us in contempt to turn over something we cannot have?
Yeah, they're using you as a hammer. I suspect that you hammer cyber ninjas and say, turn it over.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Now, the Attorney General is looking into this as well. You've turned this over to him. What is the goal there?
So we have turned over everything we have, and other people who have garnered information have done the same. What we need is the Attorney General to look at these facts and either, back the auditor up and say, yes, this is correct. Or if they find that there's problems that they can't back up 100%, I need to know that. If there is changes in the law that needs to be done, that's what we're working on. If there was intent, remember, never, never, never have I ever used the word fraud, ever. You don't say fraud unless you can prove fraud. So if there was mistakes, were they mistakes because somebody just didn't follow the rules, or they were inept, or did they intentionally do something that would have affected it? And if it was intentional with the purpose of committing fraud, then the Attorney General will have to sort that out as well.
Let me just get a bottom line from you here. What I hear you saying is you believe Joe Biden won. Is that correct?
I will tell you that I believe that if we counted the ballots like Maricopa County did, yes, Joe Biden won.
Okay, so you're leaving the door open that there may have been enough problems in the election that could have changed the result. Am I hearing you say that?
What I'm saying is that if people, and I'm not trying to stir the pot here in any way whatsoever, what I'm saying here is when you have thousands of ballots that were supposedly duplicate ballots, but they were never, the ballots weren't marked as duplicate. I can't tell you whether they really were duplicates or not. I can tell you, if ballot envelopes were not signed and the law says you're not supposed to count them if they're not signed, and they were counted, then that could be a problem. And there's a host of other things, change of custody issues. We talked about all of that. So what I'm saying is that if you don't follow the laws, then I couldn't, knowing what I know now, would I be able to certify and say I would be 100% positive that this were the accurate counts? I couldn't do that because there were mistakes made.
Mistakes, but are you suggesting that this was an effort to rig the election, for lack of a better word?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
So we're talking
No,
about
you would never.
sloppiness, maybe, versus
Yes.
malfeasance.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's an
as
important
I said,
distinction. I'm just trying to understand kind of where you're coming from on this. What do you believe will happen in the wake of all this? Do you believe election laws will be tightened surrounding elections, and how do you do that without quote-unquote disenfranchising voters and making it harder for people to vote?
So first of all, remember, we should be making it easy to vote and hard to cheat. And regardless of which party you are, we should all be on the same page on that. Surely the Democrats don't want our election laws to be set up so that people can cheat, right? I mean, certainly they don't want that, and I'm sure the other voters don't. So I think that if we can just sort of close some of those loopholes that are in there, if we can start just making sure we follow the laws and follow the policy, you know, if there's people still on the rolls that don't live here anymore or are deceased, you know, shouldn't we be cleaning up those voter rolls so that we don't have a lot of ballots just floating around out there in the mail somewhere?
Well,
we can do better.
Yeah, I think there is agreement there that voters have to have confidence in the process. I think there's no disputing that. Senator Fann,
right.
thank you for
You're welcome.
for talking to us. Senate President Karen Fann. Best of luck in retirement, but as you said, you've got a few months to go still, so we'll be chatting with you down the road. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, John.
Thank you. We're back in a minute on Newsmaker Saturday.
Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Wanted to take a moment to reflect on a friend. Arizona Friday said goodbye to former Attorney General Grant Woods, who died suddenly 3 weeks ago. He was 67 years old. Grant was a powerful voice in the public square, even though he only served 2 terms as Attorney General from 1991 to 1999. But he was always rumored to be running maybe for something, for senator or maybe governor. But in the end, the truth be known, politics was way down Grant Woods' list of life passions. He was a writer, a playwright, a songwriter, a musician. He was, in short, a Renaissance man. And above all, he cherished his family. I wanted to take a little time to reflect on Grant Woods with a guy who knew him pretty well, Dr. Warren Stewart Sr, pastor at First Institutional Baptist Church of Phoenix. He presided over Grant's funeral. It's great to see you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, John. Great to see you, and thank you for having me.
Well, your paths crossed when Grant Woods was running for Attorney General. Tell me the Grant Woods you knew.
Grant Woods was a remarkable human being. You can't categorize him. You can't put him into one category. As his wife Marlene said, he was big. I mean, he was big, and that's just who he was. He was very special.
Pastor Stewart, when you met Grant Woods, this is in the early 90s. We're right in the middle of this hotly contested debate over whether to create a statewide King holiday honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Grant, even though he was a Republican, you sensed in him that this is something he truly, deeply believed was the right thing to do.
Grant did not hesitate to join our campaign to win a Martin Luther King Jr. state holiday here in Arizona, even though, as history says, he was the first chief of staff for former Senator John McCain. But when John McCain was a representative, he was against the Martin Luther King holiday. And so Grant, his chief of staff, said, no, that's the right thing to do. We must join the nation in honoring Martin Luther King Jr.
You talked about him at the funeral, that he was more than just a politician. Obviously deeply, deeply connected to his family. That was job one in Grant's world. Tell me a little bit more about the Grant that you came to know, his heart.
Grant was a man of faith. A lot of people may not have known that. He was an active member of the All Saints Episcopal Church on Central Avenue. I used to preach there under the late Father Carlosi, and Grant would come up. He and Marlene would shake my hand. Grant was very special. Grant was like, as I said, a white John Lewis. John Lewis is famous for saying, if you see something that's not right, that's not fair, that's not just, say something, do something, get in trouble, good trouble. And Grant Woods, as you could tell by his wife's eulogy, was getting into good trouble until the day he died.
Dr. Stewart, did it matter that he had an R before his name?
Not with Grant Woods. He was a human being first and an advocate of liberty and justice for all. And by all, I mean everyone.
Can I share a story with you that he told me?
Sure.
And you may know this. During the tobacco settlement, he ended up in the South dealing with these tobacco companies. He ends up in Memphis, and he told me one time, he said, you know, the greatest thrill of that trip is I went to soul singer Al Green's church in Memphis and took in that service. He said it was the coolest thing he'd ever seen.
I'm sure Grant was rocking, and you know, he was a lover of music.
Yes.
And so I'm sure he felt right at home in the Reverend Al Green's church.
Right, exactly. What do you think is the legacy of Grant Woods? I mean, again, he didn't serve a long time, but he seemed to always be hovering in the public discussion.
Grant spoke truth to power. And the unique thing about Grant literally represented the powers that be. So he was a power that spoke truth to power when the powers that be were out of order, when they were unjust, when they were unfair with others. He was power speaking truth to power, and that's rare to find.
He didn't ever hesitate getting into the fray, even when at the moment he would get in, whatever his position might be, was unpopular.
If it was about justice, if it was about right, Grant entered the fray, regardless of who he rubbed the wrong way.
Reverend Stewart, how do you sum up a man's life in a service like that? It's very, very difficult. I mean, you had Charles Barkley there. You had Senator John McCain's wife, Cindy. Nils Lofgren of the E Street Band wrote a song about him. I mean, that's a testament that you know, he made an impact on a lot of people.
Grant was a remarkable human being. To me, that sums it all. Remarkable.
Yeah, and he didn't, I don't think he really cared what your background was, what your politics was, what color you were. He didn't care. He wanted to know, were you a cool person that he wanted to spend time with? And if you were in.
Yes, and Grant was very sincere. What you saw is what you got. He did not put on airs. He did not change faces. The Grant you saw one day was the same Grant you saw another day.
Reverend Stewart, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much, and God bless us for having Grant Woods to be in our lives.
Yeah, amen. And to his family, to Marlene and the 5 kids and his grandkids, our sincerest, deepest sentiments go out to you. He was quite a guy, Reverend Stewart, thank you. Good to see you.
Amen.
All right, be well. We're back in a minute on Newsmaker Saturday. Thanks as always for tuning in and watching Newsmaker Saturday. And if you want to catch prior programs or even pass this one along, this is a new way we're going to do it. There's the QR code on your screen. Just pull out the phone on your smartphone or the photo app on your smartphone and just dial into that image, and it will take you right to what you need to know to find former programs, current programs, anything you want connected to Newsmaker Saturday. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday.